We are back on Skywatchers Radio right here on the Dark Matter Radio Network and on PSN Radio. And now, like promised, we do have our guest of the evening, Mr. Robert Morningstar. Welcome back to the show, Robert. It's been way too long since we had you on here.
It's been a few months.
I know.
Last time. Yeah. Well, it's good to be back. Spring is finally broken. We've had a fake thing for the last few weeks, and now
I know. You feeling better? I know you were a little
I
under the weather.
The winter. This was the worst winter of my life. We had 4 below zero in New York, and we had a long stretch of Arctic air. It was pretty amazing. It was like living in Siberia, really.
What part of New York are you in?
I'm right in Manhattan, on the upper west side.
More reason why I love Florida.
Oh, I know. It's very tempting. The weather is tempting, but the pythons, the alligators, the scorpions.
Pythons? What are you? Where the
I
hell
haven't seen a python
living? Where do you think we're living? In the middle of the bayou or something?
We're in the swamps of Florida.
We're near the Okefenokee. Close enough. Anyway, listen, I was listening to the show earlier. I just want to make one correction to one of your guests. He was ribbing Roger Moore, 007, saying he was Canadian. Now, he was born in Stockwell, England. He's 100% British. 007.
Who said that Roger Moore was...
Oh, I was listening to the show earlier between 9 and 10 o'clock, and there was a whole...
Oh, that was not our show. That was someone else.
Was it on PSN Radio or on Dark
PSN?
Matter?
I thought it was your voice, actually. That's why I thought it was...
It might have been a podcast that we were running from a previous episode or something, because we were live at 10, so...
Anyway, so...
that happens. You know what's funny, Robert? Not to cut you off, but this has happened to us several times, where Keith, who runs a replay of Skywatchers Radio, which you're listening to live right now, this is live, folks, he plays the replay. And this has happened several times, that I've actually been here at home in the studio, just, preparing the archive of the show we just did an hour ago or 2 hours ago or whatever. And now it's like 2 or 3 in the morning, and I get calls from people wanting to talk about the subject that we're talking about on air. And I'm like, the show ended like 2 hours ago, man.
Right.
What do you mean? It's on right now. Or the worst is when they call like 2 days later and they're like, yeah, is this Angel from PSN Radio and Dark Matter Radio? And I'm like, yes. Well, you had this guest on the other night, and I really wanted to ask you a question about what he was talking about. And my answer is, why don't you call in when we're live on air, people? Like, just pick up the phone, dial the numbers. It's very easy, 786-245-8127. Yeah. That's it. Not afterwards. But it's amazing how that happens all the time on the show.
Well, I wanted to just comment that I was very sad to hear about Travis Walton's grandchild.
Oh, my God, yes.
Yeah.
Because I met Travis Walton last month. He came to New York with Peter Robbins to screen the new movie, Travis Walton, the real story.
The documentary, right, yeah.
And it's something to meet a person that you've known for 40 years, basically.
Mm-hmm.
This is 2015. It's the 40th anniversary of his abduction, and he's going to have an event the 4th, the 5th, and the 6th down in Arizona, in Snowflake, Arizona. He's inviting people to come down and go with him to the site where the abduction happened, and it's going to be a very interesting event. Peter Robbins and others, Alan Steinfeld, who's a producer of New
This
Reality.
is taking place on the Starfire Summit, right there. He's having later on this year.
It's going to be, I don't know if that's the name of it. It's actually his event in Snowflake, Arizona, November 5th. And I encourage everyone who can make it to support him, especially now with the situation. But to be honest with you, it was, for me, a historic experience because we're about 2 years difference in age. And I don't know about you, how long ago you heard about Travis Walton, if you followed it. But
oh, my God.
We've all aged together. I was a young man when he was abducted. I heard about it, saw him on TV, then, the 70s, and then the 80s, and then Larry King. And we were all aging together. And to meet a person about whom you've known so much and heard so much after 40 years, it was a very special experience. And especially because I got the real story from the horse's mouth and what really happened and why. The most amazing, intriguing part of the story is Travis Walton has had 40 years to think about why this happened and why the aliens took him. And his conclusion is that they injured him and they took him. One group of aliens took him to repair him, and the second group of aliens rescued him from the first group of aliens. And he got so close. I had never, we've all seen the movie and we've seen the posters, the drawings, which are very famous by now. They're icons. And it looks like the craft is very high in the trees, but as he described it in this...
It really wasn't, yeah.
It was 15 feet above the ground, and he actually jumped under it. He says as he got closer, the field, the electromagnetic field and energy around the craft became palpable, and he started feeling it tingling in his skin. And in an instinctive motion to take cover, instead of dropping back, he lunged forward and crouched really low under it, and he says it was at 15 feet. And at this point, this blue light discharged, and he was sent flying 10 feet, and he landed like a rubber doll. He hit and bounced.
Yeah, he did.
He was dead, you know?
You know, the first time I ever interviewed Travis, Robert, I asked him, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, Travis, when you jumped out of that truck and you started walking towards this UFO in the middle of the woods, what were you thinking?
Why didn't you go the other way?
Why did you even get out? But you know what? The funny thing is, all these years later, after talking to Travis a few times and really thinking about that, it's human nature. I think I would get out of the truck too.
Well, he says, and here's another interesting thing. He says that he was exceptionally curious. He was very cocky.
Right.
He wanted to show off, but he opened the door before the car stopped rolling. And his friends later told him that they thought that the aliens already had him under mind control and were already suggesting the encounter. So
maybe it wasn't mind control. Maybe he just had a few 2 beers in the pickup truck.
I don't think they had gotten to the beer stage. They just left work after all, chopping trees down all day. I think they
well,
were
maybe the driver no, but you don't know about everybody else.
Yeah, well, I don't even think that we have to go there. The important thing is he survived. But the other part is the rescue part, When we think about abduction, it's got really more sinister overtones. And his idea that this was a rescue, 2 rescues. One, the Greys injured him, banged him up, bruised, and they were trying to patch him up. But then when he awoke and got very defensive and threatening and menacing, it's the sort of Nordics intervened, and he feels that they were a second group of aliens that found out or were watching the first group and then threw him out and laid him out.
See, I don't think they rescued him so much as they probably were told, hey, this guy's freaking out. You might want to come over and help him because you kind of look like him. I think that's kind of like basically what happened. Because if you read the book and you hear his account of like the way it happened, the gray aliens that were on the ship approached him first when he was in the small corridor room, the small medical room.
Right.
And as soon as he saw them, he freaked out and started waving a thing at him, trying to get him to back off. And then they backed off and left the room. And that's when he started peeking around the door and seeing if it was safe to go outside. And that's when he decided to go outside. And then, shocking enough, these human-looking beings come at him, which could have been a number of things. Could have been a rescue. Could have been they were there already originally, and they thought that maybe we should go help him because he's not used to the whole alien thing. Let's help him out. We look like the guy. I think that's more along the lines of what really happened.
He also spoke regarding the movie, and he said that it was really Hollywoodized. That it gave the feeling, but the aliens never covered his face with a membrane. But it gave the feeling of the inability to breathe and the shock. But also, he wasn't laid out naked on the road. He said that was really way out Hollywood. He had his clothes on. So, a very interesting experience.
Yeah, no, nothing that happened, and it's funny because I was shocked when I heard some of the stuff that did not happen at all that was in the movie. Like he never woke up in the little pod that had that he was covered in and all this goo and stuff.
Right.
That never happened. He never saw a spacesuit that looked like the gray aliens just hanging there in the middle of a room. That never happened.
Well, they had to embellish a little bit. Obviously, we're not.
They embellished a lot, Alan.
I think the important thing was the overall emotional experience was he said that was communicated well. He actually wants to make another film that's more accurate and more detailed to the experience, and he's encouraging people to go to his website, traviswalton.com, and write letters, to whom it may concern, producers. We'd be interested in seeing a Travis Walton movie that's accurate in detail.
With our connections, Alan, we should work on this.
Sorry about that. I was just taking a drink of water. I apologize.
Well, that's I wasn't even going to mention that. I was talking about the whole movie thing, with our connections.
Oh, okay.
Speaking of movies, I really have to share this with you. A friend of mine, Thomas R. Dickens, is a director, producer, and writer, and he worked on Star Wars movies in the special effects field, and he came up with his own science fiction story called Zone X. And I saw it in 2009, and it left it as a cliffhanger, like the old serials would leave you in the pit with the monster. Well, that's what it turned out. This really good film about the Area 51 section of the country.
Okay.
It's called Zone X, and it brings together the black triangles and the flying saucers and the grays and insectoids, and a very interesting actor, an Australian actor, has the lead. His name is David Burke, and he plays a sort of National Park Service ranger that encounters a group of people that have gotten lost in the desert, and so the Greys come and take them, and in the end, David Burke has an encounter with a giant spider, like the 1950s movies, Tarantula. Very well done, great special effects. And the last I saw him, he was snatched and in the snares of the spider, and left us wondering how he would get out of it. So I just got word tonight that Thomas finished the movie and is going to be promoting and showing it in the next few weeks and coming months.
Very cool.
Zone X. Keep an eye out for it. It's a lot of fun.
Zone X. Now, what do you think of the show that we were talking about earlier? I don't know if you were listening in the first hour, but the High School 51, based on Area 51.
Well, I heard you mention, that's the first I've heard of it, but I think
Orlando Jones is, I think, playing the head teacher or something. Yeah.
So what is the premise? It's kids that go to school at Area 51 Air Base? Or what?
Yeah, it's like an Area 51 special school for hybrids, aliens, or whatever. And there's this one human kid who's allowed to go to that school for whatever reason. And I guess he becomes like the leader of the pack.
I see. Sounds like an interesting premise. The more important thing for me is the psychological message, behind the purpose of the series, and how it's really getting to this point where they want, through the media, the powers that be start to put out the ideas that are now acceptable and desirable to have for the coming epoch. And it seems to me that the obvious presence of extraterrestrials in the sky is soon going to be obvious presence of extraterrestrials on the ground and more interactions. So they've taken away the boogeyman aspect of ETs to some degree, but I'm one of those people who is still wary of the real secret ET agenda. So I follow the work of Carla Turner and her philosophies. Do angels who are here for benevolent reasons really need to go around skulking in the dark? Do people who have good intentions really go around abducting people, erasing their memories, and doing all of the implants and transplants that they do? So I think as humans we have a covenant with humanity, and we should not embrace aliens with open arms so readily. You were asking me about favorite alien-related movies?
That's one question we had, yes.
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
The scariest movie that I think I've ever seen, and it, for the power not only it had over me at the moment, the critical moment, but what I saw it do to an audience. I'd like to relate to you the first time I saw Alien, when the creature comes out of Kane's stomach, And
Very powerful, yes.
Yes. My girlfriend grabbed my arm, my bicep, and clawed it like a tiger. And so she distracted me. I was in shock looking at this thing on the screen. But she screamed and clawed my arm. So she distracted me. And when I looked, she was under the seat. But when I looked from her up to the rest of the audience, 2/3 of the audience had jumped under the seat. I had never seen a mass hysteria at a critical moment like that. And the only thing that I can compare to it is having gone to see The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. And I was seated in the second seat, and my girlfriend was in the aisle seat, and next to me was this young lady, an African-American, and she was sitting there totally gripped by the movie. And at the moment when they're finding out which one was the alien blood, remember they're sticking the copper wire into the alien blood?
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
She was literally on the edge of her seat, and then when the wire touched the alien blood, it jumped out and it made that crazy noise. This girl leapt from my left side over me and my girlfriend and landed in the aisle, screaming with her knees bent, her hands to her face, just screaming at the top of her lungs, and I could not believe what I'd just seen. She just went boing, vaulted. 2 people to jump, screaming hysterically. So I think those 2 scenes in those two science fiction movies really are the epitome of horror. I've never seen an audience reaction.
Would you call those like the scariest movies you've ever seen, though, non-alien or alien-related?
Scariest scenes? The scariest movies I've ever seen that not alien-related? I think that what immediately comes to mind is the movie called The Haunting.
Huh, really?
The
one with
Haunting.
The one with Liam Neeson?
No, older than that, in the 1960s.
Oh, the original Haunting. Okay, yeah, that was actually a remake. Yeah.
Yeah, that movie comes to mind. Another one was Black Sabbath, which was a trilogy. Boris Karloff hosted it, and it had 3 stories in it, 3 separate little standalone stories that were put together. And the last one was called The Ring, and it was from a story by Chekhov. And that movie made me jump across the room. like the girl jumped from my left seat over me and my girlfriend into the aisle. When I saw that movie at about age 13, like in the 60s, I jumped from one chair into the other at the moment when the old dead witch comes back for her ring. It's called The Ring, and it's about a lady who's an embalmer where she takes care of bodies. This old witch dies, and she has this ring, so when she comes to treat the body, she takes the ring off the finger and steals it, and then her problems begin until, it builds up to this climax, very, very eerie, very dramatic, when the witch comes back for her ring, and, you die of fright. It's amazing how popular fear is as a form of entertainment.
Of course. Yeah, to me, one of the scariest movies I've ever seen, and I know we're way off topic here, but one of the scariest films I think in existence is The Exorcist. I still cannot watch that original Exorcist movie with the lights off. I just can't do it.
Oh, the fact is, it's a true story, and people don't believe in that realm. I think can be more easily victimized by it, and I think there is substance to the story. Yeah, of course, they made it a little girl as the victim of the possession, but the story from 1948, which happened in Georgetown, William Peter Blatty's book is on a real case that involved a boy,
right,
who was possessed.
Huh.
The alien contact can lead to things. If you were talking about telepathy, and the telepathy of an alien is very strong, and it can confuse a person into not knowing whether the thought is his own thought or her own thought or the thought of the alien. It's very hard to tell your own mind, and it takes quite a bit of experience with telepathy to recognize. I often say to myself, one of my self-disciplines or self-observation is to stop periodically and to say to myself, is this thought I'm thinking truly my own? Because so many of the thoughts that are in our heads are really induced by media, by songs, by advertising, by suggestion.
Yeah,
Right.
there's enough subliminal messaging out there. You never know if your thought is really your own.
Oh, yeah, no, if you think you're not being conditioned by media, then you're completely wrong, because they condition you from the moment you're born to the moment you die. They condition your entire lifespan with the stuff they put out there. It's amazing.
Yep. So how does one gain independence from that?
You gotta turn off the TV. Turn off the TV. Yeah.
I think it was on your show. I said to the audience, everything in your experience in life is real, except what you see on television.
Yep.
And I have found there's a discordant frequency vibration behind mass media news, and it's a background noise that creates a sense of tension and anxiety from moment to moment and tries to sustain it. And you can experience it by watching any one of these breaking news stories, or even listening to somebody like Wolf Blitzer reporting on the Middle East. The background noise creates a certain kind of emotional resonance, which is not a pleasant one. It's kind of like an anxiety stream, and you can experience it, the on and off of it just by hitting your mute button. Watch some news for a while and to pay attention more to your feelings than what you're listening to, and just suddenly hit mute and watch how the room changes. Then put it on again. You'll start to understand what I'm talking about. And I find a lot of subliminal seduction in many of the drug commercials that are aired. And
if my erection lasts for more than 4 hours, I'm calling everybody, not a doctor.
Get help. Yeah, exactly. Don't get help. Get more girls.
Yeah, the cognitive dissonance element in the conditioning, how anybody can watch those commercials and really seriously think about using those drugs while the voiceover is telling you of all the perils, the risks, and the pitfalls. They're showing you all these wonderful images that are so entertaining, from the one that gets me is people doing Tai Chi, and there's a dog running around. And I said to myself, the only one doing Tai Chi in this commercial is the dog.
And the whole thing is an ad for milk, which makes no sense.
It's an ad for drugs that fix your arthritis, but will give you bleeding and heart attacks and all those other things. So anyway, the point is that we are waking people up, and I think that we're not as suggestible as we used to be. And I think that's a very good thing. The media,
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, when the media...
And I think a lot of it has to do with the alternative media and the online community coming together and giving out news that the media is not putting out there.
Well, I think we're forcing their hand. I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the big events in my life over the last couple of years was last year the Secret Space Program and Breakaway Civilization Conference, which brought together really a good group of people with a lot of important information that outed all the cover-ups. And I think that in doing so, the speakers at the Secret Space Program conference forced NASA's hand to start to release the real information. Just since then, in December 14th of 2015, very little media hoopla about it, only to mention it in passing. The methane content that was discovered in the atmosphere of Mars is indicative of organic life activities. And on December 14th of 2015, last year, there was a NASA conference, and they said, 2014, last year, they stated that there's life on Mars and has been life on Mars. Now they have running water. They have streams and rivulets. They have ponds, and now more and more water is appearing. And yet, since 1992, they were ridiculing Richard Hoagland and other Mars researchers, including myself, who were saying it's self-evident that there's water on Mars. There are lakes on top of certain peaks there.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about the report that said methane on Mars doesn't mean that the Curiosity rover has found life.
Right.
That's the piece you're talking about, right? That came out, 2014 in December? Is that when that came out?
December 14th. I just saw the press conference. The reason I watched the NASA channel, and on cable, and they really release a lot of stuff without saying a word about it. About 3 or 4 years ago, I happened to have handy videotapes at the time. We switched away. It's a shame. It's a lot easier to record something you want on a videotape. You just chuck it in. Well, anyway, they were doing a thing on Mars, and something said, "Robert, put it in the videotape. Start recording." I start recording it, and at the end of this Mars Curiosity stream, they showed what looks to me like a beach with pools of water. The tide's just gone out, and the very last scene was a scene of a beach with waves rolling in. Now, the remarkable thing about this little strip of video is that the waves are rolling in at a different speed and a different velocity than we would see on Earth. It's really an amazing little piece of tape. I was on Coast to Coast and released three frames that I was able to capture. I'll soon be able to put it on YouTube. I've been waiting for a long time to get a YouTube channel where I can upload this. So you're all going to see it. It's a beach on Mars.
Looking forward to it.
Doesn't shock me. Let me ask you, Robert, have you seen the video that circulated a few years ago, and it's still all over the internet, from the supposed Mars Viking secret mission in 1962? Where we supposedly landed on Mars in the 60s.
I've seen that. That comes from a movie called Alternative 3, which came out.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Well, that's a very convincing piece of video.
It really is.
That for early, I recall it was about 1972, if I'm correct, that Alternative 3 was aired only a couple of times out there in England. And then the tape disappeared and has reemerged now. But I'm saying for 1973, that terrain and whoever was flying that quote-unquote helicopter really did a phenomenal job of making me believe that I was flying over Mars.
I mean, even you mentioned the terrain. It really does look a lot like what we're seeing from the rover now.
Now, exactly.
Yeah, it's even the way the sky looks. Which, by the way, have you noticed this, Robert? Have you noticed that how the sky on Mars has changed color from NASA's pictures in the last few years? Originally, when they released photos of Mars, it always had a really orange sky. Now it's looking more blue.
Exactly. I said, how come Mars is starting to look like Arizona? All of a sudden, the last 4 or 5 years, hey, it's starting to look like New Mexico and Arizona.
Yeah. I wonder if they're doing this on purpose.
Well, they were tweaking the colors. Everybody knows. What is his name is Steve Troy, and he used to work closely with Richard Hoagland. But he wrote an essay called "The True Colors of the Moon," and our friend Jose Escamilla picked up on that idea and did a whole movie on how the colors, the real colors of the moon, are bleached out of NASA photos for the most part. Why does the terrain that the Chinese rover is running around on look brown and orange with green patches on it? Have you noticed that?
Yeah, that is a good question.
The color photos, the color video of the Chinese rovers shows it running on kind of a rust-colored land, and in single frames that the Chinese have released, I've found that there are distinctly green patches in that terrain.
Now, how come we can't see that here on Earth just with the naked eye? Could it be because of the atmosphere, makes the color disappear?
Do you know why the sky looks blue during the day?
Because it's reflecting the water in the ocean?
Because it's refracting and filtering out all but the majority of the blue light. A full spectrum light is coming from the sun, but the atmosphere is
way off.
Filter, and it's sort of filter, and it's screening out and allowing in only, primarily the blue light, except at sunset when it acts as a lens and we get the red sunsets and sunrises. Right. Well, I pondered this idea: why we are missing the true colors of the moon. And then it hit me. You know what? The atmosphere is still there at night, and it's still doing the same thing it does during the day, and it's filtering out primarily everything except the blue spectrum. But there's a fellow, I have to say, this fellow, Dark Skywatcher 74, he has his own observatory. It's a digital telescope that he sets up. He's got a YouTube channel, and this man has captured some of the most beautiful images of the moon. And in one of his programs, as he's scanning the moon from the northwest, I should say from the northeast to the southwest, he passes over several regions of very distinct terrain, highlands, mountains, the Maria, etc. And there, in his videos, you can see the distinct colors of the surface of the moon, including that color that the Chinese rover is running around on, that rust orange color. You know, Gene Cernan, he found the Genesis rock in this crater that got blown out. When they went up to that crater, he said he saw orange soil. That's what attracted him to it. So he went and took samples, and it was in that excavation that he discovered the orange soil, but he also discovered what is called the Genesis rock. It's one of the oldest
Here's a thought. If there's areas on the moon that is brownish, kind of like what Mars looks like, what are the odds that the rover's actually on the moon and it's just a big old hoax?
You mean the Mars? No.
Yeah.
First of all, the moon's horizon and its curvature is different than that of Mars. They're different sized planets.
True.
And the atmosphere that you see in the rover pictures are quite distinct from what I call atmosphere on the moon. The moon does have something of an atmosphere. There is condensation and huge areas of dark smoke filled craters. You can see them in some of the Apollo 14 photographs as they went around onto the far side of the moon. They were going over the Mare Orientale, which is usually a very distinct area of two concentric rings of mountains around an abyss that is so deep that you could fit Mount Fuji inside it. Wow. And in those photographs, the thing is fuming and smoking as if it's erupting, sort of like a smoldering volcano. And I found a lot of that kind of activity, smoke and vapors, that appear in certain Apollo photographs. So the moon is very active. It's dynamic. It does have some semblance of volcanism, and it has a tremendous amount of water that's all over the moon. The University of Tennessee discovered that so much limestone in the Apollo 14 rock specimens that they said that water is ubiquitous on the moon. It means everywhere. And then the Chandra satellite confirmed that there are wet patches around the moon, everywhere around the moon. And then the La Crosse impact that broke up in Cabeus crater disintegrated ice through which the second part flew. And they've proven now that there's plenty of water on the moon. It makes perfect sense there should be water on the moon, since the impact that created the moon gouged out a huge part of the Pacific Ocean. I mean, the deepest part of the ocean is in the Pacific, and it's hypothesized that Theia, when it impacted this planetoid, impacted Earth. It hit in that region, and so it should have carried away trillions of gallons of water, which then must have congealed into ice and sunk into the moon.
Chunks of ice. Yeah.
We're getting there.
Hopefully, we'll have answers eventually in this
What
lifetime.
fellows have to see is the color photographs that Clementine took of the far side of the moon are very revealing. They don't look like anything that NASA's shown at the front of the moon. there are vast cavernous regions in certain regions of the moon, leading into hollows in the interior. The moon is kind of lumpy. It has three sections, mascons inside it. It has three lumps. It's kind of weird, and that's really the reason that this asymmetry of its density is the reason that it's always got the face facing us. The greater mass is on one side of the moon, and so that is holding it's the gravitational link to Earth, and so prevents it from spinning around relative to us, though it spins around relative to the sun.
Interesting.
Makes sense. Yeah. Robert, have you seen? I'm sure you've seen it. And this has been talked about recently in the news. The Saturn's moon, the one that looks like the Death Star. Have you done any
series?
Yes. Have you done any homework on that at all? Because it really does have an artificial satellite look to it. Like it doesn't look like a real, moon.
Well, you mean the one with the ridge?
Right.
Yeah.
It looks like it has like the same
It's like
kind
a
of design as
wall.
the Death Star.
I would tend to think that that's more of a natural formation because of the way the gravitational forces of Saturn and its moons and Jupiter would interact with those moons during their formation. The moon of Saturn that I'm really interested in is Titan. That is the one that is the most Earth-like looking moon, and it has oceans, although they're oceans of methane, and so
won't be going to swim in one of those oceans.
But really, honestly, I'll tell you why I'm interested in this. I read Project Sign. Blue Book was the third Air Force study, and there were certain findings in Project Sign that should be discussed, and I'm going to tell you now. In those days, the United States Air Force, the U.S. government, got the major observatories on Earth to track the UFO motherships, because the flying saucers were here and being deployed apparently by carriers, UFO motherships, and they were fleets. And so they asked the astronomers to try to follow these fleets and to find out where they were coming from and going to, because they were changing positions. And the astronomers came back and said it appeared that these craft were coming from Saturn's moon, Titan. So when Huygens landed and found this very Earth-like looking terrain and weather, I said to myself, maybe there's something going on, and, the Greys. See, the story of the Greys coming from Zeta Reticuli is something that I don't really fully accept.
Me neither.
I think that some of the extraterrestrials visiting Earth are, as I say, local yokels, products, animated intelligences that are products of solar system evolution, parallel evolutions. And there could have been, as well, parallel evolution of life on the moon for a period of time. Because when Theia gouged out the Pacific Ocean and carried away a big chunk of Earth and its water and everything that was in the soup, and it's very likely that the same or similar chemical interactions were occurring on the moon when it was really full of water, and there may have been some life forms that evolved on the moon, parallel evolution of their own, parallel life forms developing, and they may have adapted to a subterranean or sublunar, I should say, sublunar existence. I don't think that's so far-fetched. So it could be, something creepy crawly on the moon. I'll tell you honestly.
Yeah.
The one of the scariest pictures I've ever seen was the first Zond lander. The Zond Russian Zond lander came down near a crater, and the first picture of it that I saw, I remember, was on the cover of the Daily News back in the 60s. I saw something that looked like a horseshoe crab and a lot of tracks all around the crater. And then if you look into the crater, it appears as if there's something rising out of the crater. It's a still photograph, but there's something that's rising out of it. It looks mechanical to me. And ever since I saw that photograph, I've entertained the idea that there is a lot of mining going on the moon.
Does not shock me at all, Hart. Yeah,
you see tracks, if you look at some of the lunar photos.
Surface areas, yeah, you do.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you grow up in the country and you learn about, footprints and tracks, and when you study entomology and you look, under the microscope or at high-resolution photographs of ant colonies and termites, you recognize the tracks that they leave. And when I saw that Zahn photograph, the terrain around the crater, and this thing, it looks like one would say a rock, but it reminded me of a horseshoe crab. And to be quite honest with you, it gave me the willies. And when I see the picture even now, I look at it like, it gives me the willies.
Hey, let me ask you, what do you think of the Apollo 20 videos that have surfaced on the internet?
I think the Apollo 20 story is a myth. I think that there may be some footage included in that video that may have been taken by other missions. That's what I think.
Well, I know someone who works who actually is retired from NASA, and he actually said that the pictures, the video that shows the
Mona Lisa alien,
Right.
He said to me that that's actually really the inside of a LEN module. That's not a hoax.
This is why I say I don't dismiss the Apollo 20 scenario. I don't recognize an Apollo 20 mission, but I say that the footage that was used in compiling that story, a lot of it looks authentic to me. In particular, the Mona Lisa, because I saw many years ago, I saw a couple of still photographs that were taken inside the command capsule. And they had laid out some of the specimens and some of the baggage that they picked up on the moon. Apollo 14 picked up about 800 to 900 pounds of lunar material. And there was something laid out on the table, as you would call it, but it's actually part of the rocket motor, I believe. And it looked to me like it could have been the shape of a humanoid body encased in something. It didn't have an ordinary rock shape. So then years later, this Mona Lisa story comes out, and I want to mention that this alien Mona Lisa looks very Oriental. She has a remarkable face. She looks Mongolian.
She looks
Asian,
more Alaskan
Indian
to me.
She's
Alaskan.
Asian Indian. Like that's what I was getting more like Middle Eastern.
Well, and then the great detail in, let's call it the mummification process. It's remarkable, and to me, I remember the story of Chang'e. You see, the reason the Chinese named their rover Chang'e and the little rover Yutu is a story of a Chinese woman that was supposedly abducted and taken to the moon. Her name was Chang'e. And she was a woman who... Really? She was a woman who Chinese legend says thousands of years ago, she and her husband were concocting the pill of immortality, the elixir of immortality. And it was a very potent alchemical formula, a pill. And it was supposed to be half and half. And she was afraid of being caught with this, so she swallowed it. She took the whole pill, and she started to levitate. And she floated up, and she floated up. And according to the story, a 6 foot tall Chinese gray rabbit took her off to the moon. And when the Chinese look at the moon, they don't see the man on the moon that we see. Their icon is a rabbit and this Chinese princess, Chang'o.
And here I always wanted the moon to actually be made out of cheese.
Well, I didn't want that.
So disappointed.
But let me finish the story, is that I learned of Chang'o in 1969 when Apollo 11 was going to the moon. NASA Houston called them up and told them to be on the lookout for this Chinese princess named Chang'o. She'd been abducted 2,000 years ago and taken to the moon by a 6-foot-tall Chinese rabbit. So if they saw her around, they'd keep an eye out for her and let them know. And the Apollo astronauts weren't giggling when they said, "Hey, Roger." It's fascinating.
That is a fascinating story. Robert, we're just about out of time. We have about maybe a minute left. Quickly, give us your your website address, so the listeners can track you down and keep following along. Of course, UFO Digest and any other website you want to promote.
Well, go to my. I basically run my Facebook page like my newspaper. So
yes, you do.
I encourage people to log on to Facebook and to go to Robert Morningstar. The one with the dolphin head icon, and I think it says Robert Morningstar -12 or something like that. So tune in, keep in touch, and look forward to talking to you again.
We will definitely have you back on pretty soon, my friend.
Love having you on. Always
love having you on. Guys, we're almost out of time here. We got to go. Keith is over there giving me the signal. It's been fun. Thank you, Robert, again for being our guest tonight, and it's always fun having you on, man. You're the best. And thank you, Nancy Burns, for being on the first hour and kind of getting some news out. Kind of. Sort of. Thank you to Keith Rowland.
We always get sidetracked,
Always. Thank you to Keith Rowland for providing the stream every week. Thank you to Art Bell for coming back in a few months and allowing us to say, stick around, Art Bell's next. But not yet. Not yet.
Soon.
You know how soon, Alan? No?
I don't have the clock ticking down on my screen.
It's like 72 days, I think, or something like that.
Tick, tick, tick,
so
tick,
close.
tick, tick,
tick,
tick,
tick,
tick,
tick, tick, tick. Guys, we'll be back next week on Skywatchers Radio with another fascinating guest. Maybe not as good as Robert here, because Robert he's the best. I mean,
right.
Let's be honest. Robert, you're the best. But next week we're going to have Bob Mitchell on, and we're going to talk about UFOs, aliens, and alien encounter. So stick around. That's going to be a lot of fun. Stick around for whatever is coming up next here on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Good night, everybody. See you next week. Stay safe. Stay classy.